Hello everyone and welcome. We're again back on a Sunday. We've been a bit early and a bit late in the last few weeks. I think we're back on time with myself and Toby Hopkins.
Hello. After Stu's long roast lunch, I think he must have had a long. We had a bit of a communication breakdown. It's always the same.
As said Led Zeppelin or whichever old black guy they may have stolen their lyrics from.
And that links in with our feature.
Yeah,
a little later on.
Indeed it does. So how have you been anyway, Toby? We'll maybe start with the news in a minute or two, but any brief words to say before we get into this?
Well, I did. To be honest, I did have a humongous hangover yesterday, and it got me thinking about hangovers and films.
Not just the Hangover film.
Oh God! Oh right, okay, yeah. Well, there's those ones, I suppose. But I was thinking top three hangover films. Woodnell and I would obviously feature in there somewhere,
as we've covered on more than one occasion now.
So I'm not saying that should be a feature.
Okay, well maybe at some point, but I presume hopefully the night before evened out the hangover the day after.
No, it was a bit of a shocker. To be honest, it was about my third worst hangover.
Wow, and yeah, that must be
a
stinker.
It was a stinker.
Well, I'm glad I didn't ring you up for a pint yesterday.
Yeah, I was almost going to cancel today, but no, it was fine.
You've battled through.
Yeah, I absolutely battled through.
Okay, so we'll start with the news today. Having refined, it was a slightly baggy intro last week, so we'll try starting with news and then we'll maybe look at some films. So first piece of news noticed over the last week was Simon Pegg in a new film called Absolutely Anything, which they've released the trailer for it. Interestingly, it has Robin Williams doing probably his final work, which is a voiceover performance. It's directed by Terry Jones of Monty Python, and so yeah, Toby, what did you make of the trailer, having seen it?
Any project that involves Simon Pegg and the Monty Python team has got to be worth a look, and including actually Robin Williams, which you can see in the trailer. He's, as usual, he's a funny voice artist. I wasn't sure about the trailer, to be honest.
It looked like a very stock standard British comedy. I kind of got the feeling.
Yeah, I wasn't thrilled by it. But by August, when it comes out, I might have forgotten about the possible. I mean, it might mean that somebody fairly intelligent has edited the trailer so that it doesn't give everything away. They just picked 3 or 4 things that might bring you in, and you'll remember. And there's a lot more there. So that might be a possibility.
Could be. I mean, it didn't give too much away in terms of narrative, other than there's some aliens who give Simon Pegg pretty much the power to do anything he wants. So anyway, we'll watch this space. For people back home in listener world, could be worth checking out the trailer if it's something you're interested in. I think it's not. The film itself isn't out until August or something, so I daren't say it'll be on rotation a bit, and there may well be another trailer or two coming out in the meantime.
But there's also, there's a film out. I think it's right out at the moment called Man Up,
right?
Which is Simon Pegg is in. It's a rom-com.
Slightly busy chap.
He'd be absolutely busy as ever. I've counted. There are 4 trailers out with him in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So which is the top of the 4? Have you watched all 4 trailers?
Yes.
Which is the best of the 4?
Well, Mission Impossible looks pretty zingy, I have to say. Okay. Mission Impossible 5.
Is he doing a main role? Well, obviously not going to be the main role, but sufficient supporting role.
Yes, definitely sufficient. I think he's a kind of technical guy. I haven't watched the first Mission Impossible.
Yeah, he does wear a pair of glasses quite well, so that's probably.
And there's a great last scene in the trailer. And it's one of those trailers which I would actually recommend watching.
So Mission Impossible. You should have mentioned that. We could have added that to the news, but maybe next time, or closer to the release date.
We'll see.
Well, thank you very much, Toby. Thanks for giving me the heads up.
Well, I've got to keep some secrets away from you. And then we've also got Kill Me 3 Times.
Right. Okay. Another Simon Pegg. Again, is this support role?
No, he's leading, starring, and
Okay.
That looked quite interesting, but not quite my cup of tea. Another Hitman film.
Oh right, okay. And number 4, or should we use the Hitman link to move on to the next piece of news?
Well, the Man Up.
Man Up was number 4.
Because,
okay.
like I say, that is a film out now, so I wouldn't mind just giving a few notes on that.
Okay. Oh, have you watched it, or just is this in prospect of what you think it will be?
In prospect, and it looks like the sort of rom-com. Well, it's a rom-com set in London, starring Simon Pegg and a nice-looking lass called Lake Bell, who I've not heard of, but I like her name. It's a simple but appealing conceit that initially brings them together, and certainly swayed by Simon Pegg, this sort of fare I'd like to see. However, I wouldn't recommend the trailer because it appears to rattle through what appears to be every quip and something like the entire narrative of the film. So if you like a mildly charming looking rom-com and Simon Pegg, and you also like surprises, avoid the trailer. Go straight to the cinema because it's out more or less now, I believe.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so next piece of news: John Wick, of which we reviewed last week, 2 weeks ago, has been confirmed for a sequel. Again, I think Keanu Reeves is back on, as is the sort of stuntman director duo of Stahelski and Leach, who are returning to do it. They're happy to see another one.
Yeah, they've obviously cottoned on to the fact that it's not quite a new genre, but it's a very nice slant on an old genre, and yes, I would like to see a number 2.
Okay.
I hope they do a sort of more subtle version of it.
Are you sure?
Subtle storyline.
Do you reckon it's not going to be the same thing with a little bit more money thrown at it?
Well, look, the whole thing started with some gangsters killing his dog. The first one. So
right.
They're just going to go, oh right, some gangsters killed his cat, and then he does the same thing. It's going to be a little bit
like that,
tiresome.
But if you want more of the same, then it's probably a good thing to go for.
Yeah.
Chances of doing anything revolutionary or new on the subject's probably slim, but I guess we'll find out. The trailer hasn't come out yet, but we'll keep people posted as things crop up. A piece of very minor news, but then getting women in cinema into news seems to be far harder than anything to do with men in film in news. So Independence Day 2 have announced that Independence Day is having a sequel, which will be Independence Day 2, and they've gone for a female president this time, which is played by Sella Ward, who was Sharon Schreiber in Gone Girl, which I think we don't know if we reviewed it or if we just commented on it when we were doing our Oscar thing a while back. But I also did notice on IMDb that Bill Pullman has also been recast as Thomas J. Whitmore, who was the previous president in the original Independence Day.
What's he?
He was he's playing himself, so I guess he's retired. Maybe he's still a fighter pilot. Maybe, because that is one of the great funny scenes of cinema where he stands up in the first one and is like, "No, Mr. President, you can't go and lead the fighter pilot attack against the alien invasion because you're the president." And then he sort of does his whole speech, and then the White House gets blown up.
So what's she going to be doing? She
is
could be the co-pilot.
She's the new president. What you reckon?
Yeah, but
maybe she's a tank commander.
Yeah, or a helicopter pilot or something.
Well, all I'm wondering is what they're going to do with the White House. It did definitely get blown up in the first one. Do you reckon Do you reckon in Independence Day 2 they've rebuilt it brick for brick, or do you reckon it's going to be a new, modern, futuristic White House?
Let's just wait and tantalisingly see, I suppose. I don't know.
Okay. Next piece of news. Seeing as I think enough of that. Insert other Independence Day jokes you see fit.
No, I think she's going to be the co-pilot.
The co-pilot.
Yeah,
and surely he's really old now. Maybe he's just going to give the instructions from the ground.
Maybe he's the co-pilot.
He's had to retire a bit. Leading the fighter pilot. Okay, right. Yeah. Next bit of news. Anyway, Nick Park's doing a new animation called Early Man. It's going to be a planned feature, not a short like the Wallace and Gromit ones were. Is it something you might be interested in looking at when it comes through? Because I said Wallace and Gromit I thought were brilliant. Shaun the Sheep wasn't so great, and he did another one as well. Memory eludes me. Oh, Chicken Run with Mel Gibson.
Chicken Run and the Were-Rabbit.
I didn't care too much about either.
No, like you said, I loved the early ones. You know, the
Gromit wrong trousers and
putting down the track as the train is going on.
Yeah.
That's just the, just a fantastic scene. But when it got less parochial, I liked them less, although they're beautifully made.
Yeah.
And I think even the Were Rabbit got. I think it might have got the Oscar animation. I'm not sure.
It could well have done. I mean, it's quite a labour of love putting together those stop motion
It's
animations.
certainly been revered.
Does the notion of a feature length caveman based Nick Park animation inspire you at all? Or I mean, for me, it's mostly just if it's a half hour Wallace and Gromit release, then that's going to be good. But if it's not, then I'm not so sure. Are you in the same boat, or?
I am pretty much, and I did do a little bit of research, and I saw that they did make a shorter film, not a couple 2 or 3 years ago, called A Matter of Loaf and Death.
Yeah, that was another Wallace and Gromit.
And I haven't seen that one, but apparently that was Wallace and Gromit.
Yeah, it was quite good. I mean, the first three are the best ones, because I mean the thing I did notice actually I watched A Grand Day Out the other day, and the one thing, at least in his early work, he captured really well was the nature of silent comedy in the animation. Whereas in A Grand Day Out, they've kind of got that funny robot thing on the moon that sort of doesn't talk, and it's just kind of put a quarter in or 10p or whatever, and it starts coming to life. And again, you have some really interesting sort of silent humour based stuff. And then in the second one, you've got the a penguin, isn't it? And again, it's sort of another sort of personification of a sort of silent humour bad guy, which he does really, really well. And
that's a good point.
Has been slightly lost as he's gone further on, I found.
And in the later feature films, the companies providing them with extra money want the big stars. I mean, I think they insisted on having Mel Gibson in because they wanted a major star, as he was at the time, to capture audiences in America and wherever, so that they could make sure they got their money back. And all that.
Indeed. Okay, so final bit of news.
Yep.
As we mentioned a number of times on our podcast over the last few weeks, if not months, is Mark Strong and his many films.
He's another busy lad.
Indeed, he is. Indeed. Actually, it'd be interesting to see this year whether Simon Pegg or Mark Strong have been in more films. But
I can give that question.
Well, that might link into the question I've got as well. We'll see.
Okay.
We will see. So he's in another film called 6 Days, which is going to be based on the Iranian embassy siege of 1980, which I remember seeing from news footage, as it's a bit past my time.
Oh yeah. Right. Okay. I didn't see that. I thought you were talking about
is he in another one as well?
Explorator. Yeah.
Oh no,
which is in post-production.
I was on 6 Days, so that's
where he goes to Mars.
Oh right, okay. So he's doing the Iranian embassy scene, and he's going to Mars.
Next day, have a day's rest, and then he goes to Mars. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so that actually might mean that your
Mark
Mark Strong question might be a little different. So basically, that's mostly just news that he's in lots of films still. Okay. What was the question?
So my question is, I looked at the credits total for Simon Pegg, and given that he's a fairly modest 45-year-old.
Yeah.
I was surprised at the amount.
What, Simon Pegg or Mark Strong?
I tell you what, I'll give you Simon Pegg's number.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you I know Mark Strong's number because I did it for my own question.
Okay. So so you know his. So what do you think is Simon Pegg's? Given that he's...
It's just a simple okay, we'll go on the basis. I think when I looked, Mark Strong had something like 83 or 85 credits on IMDb. Is that about right?
It is.
So is the question, does Simon Pegg have more or less credits than Mark Strong?
Yes, that is the question. He's been a busy chap.
He has been a busy chap. I'm going to say less. Oh, there's a hard though, because Mark Strong's clocked up like half his films in the last few, 5-6 years. Simon Pegg's been...
Simon Pegg's been.
He's done a lot of voiceovers as well.
Yeah.
I'll go Simon Pegg.
What, as being more or less?
Slightly more.
It's less.
It's less.
It's 79.
Damn. Oh,
I got it.
Rubbish. Okay, well I'm going to ask you. I'm going to get you with my Mark Strong question.
Can I just point out that
go on.
He's a few years since they're both very busy chaps. He's a few years younger, so to be only 6 behind. Simon Pegg to be only 6 behind Mark Strong is he'll overtake him. I mean, not that it's a competition, but
But we'll come back to it in a year or two's time, see if he's covered the ground or not. So yeah, I'm going to ask you my Mark Strong question, which is ever so slightly different, but you might be able to work it out, seeing as you've done it. Which is since 2010, i.e. the last 5 years, on average, how many films per year has Mark Strong been in?
Well, I did actually.
Did you also?
Yeah, I did estimate it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It turned out as a bang on round number as well. Over the last 5 years, it did average. The mean average of his number of films is.
Okay, well, I worked it out from his whole career. This sounds really.
You worked out
this
his whole
sounds
career.
really nerdy. I worked it out as very roughly 4.
Okay, well, he's picked up in the last 5 years. Then he's been in on average 5 films per year in the last 5 years.
Not bad one off.
No, I think.
But that's amazing, isn't it? 5 main projects. I mean, I suppose the odd one was just.
I mean, it seems to be. Yeah, I mean, he's been in at least over, every year. He seems to have been in. Of those 5, 2, if not 3 of them have been fairly major pictures.
And he doesn't do voiceover, really, does he?
No, they're mostly entirely acting performances as well. So he's pretty much going. As we said, he's going from the Iranian embassy siege. He has a day's break and then he goes to Mars, and that's what he does. So. Where in the world is Mark Strong should probably be our next question. Right,
what role will he play?
Yeah, exactly. Where in the okay. Should we go to your week in film now? Do you want to start with the new films, or do you want to do the films that you've watched this week, which aren't new but are points of interest?
Shall we start with the new one that's definitely out now?
Yep.
Woman in Gold.
Indeed, it's the fairly big name cast. Obviously, Helen Mirren is leading it up. It's the Helen Mirren of slightly more film appearances than Judi Dench.
Yes. Don't remind me. Yeah. This tells a story of an Austrian immigrant living in the US, having fled the encroaching Nazi forces just before World War II. She's now in her 80s, and she happened to have owned a painting called Woman in Gold, which refers to a revered painting, which is yes, it's a true story. So it is a real painting. It doesn't even refer to it. Yeah, by Gustav Klimt.
Okay, yep.
That the Helen Mirren's character once owned and sorry, I'm repeating myself. It happens to be of her auntie, who she was very fond of, and now she suddenly realised, being in the US, that she wanted it back because it's now an established, famous painting in an Austrian gallery.
And is this now a film where getting it back is worth more than just the millions of dollars the painting itself is worth, presumably?
I think it's a sentimental reason, and she goes through a huge amount of legal wranglings to do it, and it does suffer a little bit. The legal stuff does get a little bit dull, but
not much action in this film.
No, it's all toing and froing and flying back and forth, and the Austrians going, no, we don't want to give it to you, and she joins up with a young lawyer who helps her, and then they split up, and the young lawyer does it on his own, and then blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But Helen Mirren is very good. She's got a particularly effective accent, and no, really, really good. And she's a classy actress.
Indeed.
And it's a lovely sub. I happen to really like the artist Gustav Klimt. It was one of my first artists I really liked.
So,
when I was at art college. So.
Is it a good film?
It's
to use a word other than good. Is it a good film?
Yeah. I'll tell you what. The reason it's good. It's a. If you like the subject, if you like the subject and you like Helen Mirren, I would say it is a good film.
Okay, but if you're not interested in Helen Mirren or Gustav Klimt, or specifically, presumably, Woman in Gold,
or that whole idea of wrangling between countries,
so diplomacy and negotiation.
Yeah, then don't.
Stay away.
But otherwise, it's
okay.
Pretty all right.
Should we now go to a film that you happen to watch this week that isn't current, which I did remember speaking to you about it. I think it was the other week when we were talking about Eddie Murphy for some reason. And, well, I've got down here Bowfinger, the Eddie Murphy Steve Martin piece from back in 1999.
Yeah, absolutely. Recommended by Stu. I wanted to go back and see it because I remember being quite tickled by it originally.
It does have a very strong concept as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I laughed at the beginning of this film pretty much instantly, with Eddie Murphy's spirited indignancy. He's playing an egotistical actor, so he's kind of playing a version of himself. And alongside that, Steve Martin's character, who is called Bowfinger, who's a small-time film producer, and he's desperate to lure Murphy's character, who I can't remember his name actually, to be in his small budget film, and I chuckled further throughout the film as he once Murphy's characters refused to be in it.
Yeah, well, that's the principle is essentially which is, we said, what is the great concept about it is I want this guy to be in my film. He's not going to be in my film, therefore I'm going to set up all the scenes around him, and then try and film it, and then make it into a film.
Film it secretly.
Yeah,
and then you get this indignant reactions from the Murphy character as people come up to him and start acting, and he's going, "What are you doing?" And that's really, and I was just it's really funny.
Yeah.
And then and then towards the end, they realise they've got most of the main scenes, and they have to get a body double, so they get a kind of somebody who looks exactly like Eddie Murphy, because it's played by Eddie Murphy. But he's really dopey, and that's also funny. And then the final, so it was a continual little chuckle. And then the final scene, I was laugh out loud when, having done quite well this film, the body double got his own films acting in an action film, but it's really badly choreographed. And he's sort of raising an arm, and some stuntman just sort of flies off, and he's looking really dopey.
Cool. So the question is,
I loved it.
Over the last week, Woman in Gold or Bowfinger? Any preference?
Yeah, Bowfinger.
Okay, right. Shall we move on to our featurette, seeing as we've got about 10 or so minutes to go?
Doing the usual thing.
Which is films about bands, as Toby alluded to with his communication breakdown line from earlier. Although we don't have any Led Zeppelin related films, although one that maybe highlights the kind of era where Led Zeppelin could have been around.
No, we do.
I
do.
Oh, do you? Well, I'm looking down my list and I don't have Zeppelin on here at all, but we'll see. We'll see how it pops up.
Okay.
Right. So, should we... Well, I mean, there's a series of classics, basically.
The song remains the same.
Oh, very good. The first one I've got... Okay, we'll go straight into it. The first one I've got on my...
quick line review.
Yeah, this one should be quite quick. First one I've got on my list is the Johnny Cash... Walk the Line, which I must admit I did actually fall asleep I don't fall asleep through too many films, but I did fall asleep watching that one, so I don't have too much to say on it myself.
I like Phoenix, Joaquin, but I didn't think he quite captured the spirit. He had a good job at it, good go at it, but he didn't catch the spirit of the Man in Black. So
it had Reese Witherspoon in it as well.
Yes, I remembered. Yeah,
didn't get an Oscar for that one either. Sid and Nancy, 1986.
And then he got her in there because she's really short and he's quite short.
Oh, what? Reese Witherspoon?
That's one of the things. He wasn't tall enough. I don't know.
To be Johnny Cash.
Yeah, Johnny Cash was quite tall, I think. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Sid and Nancy, 1986. Is the more about is Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen. Sid Vicious was the bassist in the Sex Pistols.
Yeah, pretty spot on portrayal, I think, of the punk sensibility by Gary Oldman, and again the sensibility of a pretty nutty, screechy, heroin addicted girlfriend played by Chloe Webb. And I watched it again last week, and I found it just as enjoyable as I watched it 20 years ago. And I thought her performance was actually more nuanced than I remembered, and I thought Gary Oldman's portrayal was just as good as I remembered.
Do you reckon believable as? I mean, it was tied up as a biopic more so, almost, wasn't it?
It was pretty close to it. Yeah, it was good. It was more or less excellent. Yeah.
Okay, so moving away from that is a film from 2000 called Almost Famous, which is a slightly different take on the whole band-related films, because rather than it being look at these famous people, it's more it's done from the perspective of a young boy who's he won a competition with Rolling Stone or something to basically be a journalist or write about a band and sort of follow them around. And during the period of his stay with them, you kind of see far more of the darker side of the music industry, as opposed to being a
not so much. Well, yes, a bit of darker, but I just happened to I was waiting for Stu to finish his roast potatoes.
Did you watch this morning?
I watched. So I've just watched this, and I was really surprised because I didn't remember it being this good, and I thought it was absolutely excellent, and it's close to my top three. Perhaps a close four, maybe fourth, but good. You have the metaphor of the very controlling mother who's worried about his young child getting involved in rock and roll, and you get the groupies and the activity, and you get the band members arguing, and you get the rock and roll thing. There's some I don't think we've got time really, but there's some fantastic scenes in it.
Yeah, I agree. I remember it being one of the more powerful band-related films I think I've seen. I mean, it does leave when you watch it, does leave a lasting impression.
Can I just mention one scene?
Go on then.
Right, so they're all in a little jet plane. This is towards the end of the film, and they all think they're going to die, and they all start admitting what they've done and who they've slept with, and all this sort of thing. And it's really really brilliantly done, that bit. Some of this film is quite slightly cliche and feels a bit sort of A to B. We'll get that band member to rock along the corridor and sleep with somebody else or something like that. But that was a really good scene. There's also a couple of other really great scenes.
Cool. Next one I've got on the list is Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll. I think it's the newest one I've got on the list here. Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll, which was a sort of not quite biopic, but at least a kind of retelling of sorts of Ian Dury, and mostly Ian Dury, but also during the period of the Blockheads, which was played by Gollum actor Andy Serkis. Which it didn't sound when I spoke to you you were overly impressed.
I didn't particularly like his portrayal. It kind of ruined, and this is just probably a bar to moan. It kind of ruined the idea I've got of this iconic geezer, and I was just about around when Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick came out, which was it's a kind of desert island disc song for me, and I didn't like the fact that he was showing him to be less of a good, nice person.
He came across as quite a bit of a kind of arse, basically, for the most part. And kind of quite pedantic. Although it did culminate, there was a really good bit where he gets obviously this is kind of slightly out of time with what the modern deception, but it was literally the Spastic Society back in the 80s or whatever they were called, and they asked him to do the theme song or a charity sing.
Yeah, he was pretty radical and out there, and I expect he was a bit of a drunk and a bit of a whatnot unusual.
Yeah, I mean, I quite enjoyed his interpretation of what should be a. I thought that was quite an interesting take on. So not without going into too much exactly how it pans out, but. The way that was approached and the way it took his opinion on disability as a whole and how that should be represented in music compared to what the establishment thought it should be, I thought was quite a nice and interesting kind of slightly more progressive take upon how one should view that. I mean, I also thought the one thing I did like about it, because just to add a slight positive shine, obviously you weren't here, but I thought the actual the way they recorded the live music sections I thought was very in theme and very in keeping, and I thought it was some of the best kind of actual kind of live music recording sections that had been done on film, kind of the way they'd used the camera and everything else to heighten the kind of slightly eccentric nature of the Blockheads.
Just on a little reference to that, I watched Control a few days ago, and the music on that, referring to the band Joy Division, is fantastic. It's the best part of the film. I as a positive thing for Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll, I did like the style of the whole film. It was very jaunty and apt, and there was a bit of animation work which went into it, and a kind of loose nature to it, which did work.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, just quickly mention this one, just because it is more of a direct, not a biopic, but a direct, almost documentary, which was Gimme Shelter, the 1970s documentary leading up to and covering the events of the ill-fated concert at Altamont, where obviously famously the Rolling Stones hired the Hells Angels to protect the stage and thought it'd be a really good idea to pay them in beer.
Is that how they paid for it?
Yeah, they paid them £500 worth of beer was apparently what they paid them, which, according in line with inflation, is equivalent to about £3,500 worth of beer in today's currency.
It's a good bit
to protect the stage. So essentially, it's got a bunch of Hells Angels. But I thought it was a really good documentary. They used the footage quite well. The interviews were quite good. And if you don't know the story of Altamont, then it's a good.
Was that the first concert after the
Woodstock? Well, they had Woodstock, which was obviously cited as like the big success of the Free Festival, where everyone came together. It was all lovely. It was all very peaceful and stuff. And then, within whatever it was, a few months' time, so the Stones had been on their tour with incredibly high-priced tickets everywhere they went, and the normal people were, the people who would have been their core fans, one would presume, obviously kind of quite unhappy and vocal about them basically having an utterly unaffordable tour that's only, accessible to the middle classes, basically. So they decided to put on the Free Festival at the end of their big tour, which happened after a couple of moves to be at Altamont Speedway. And then, as I said, obviously they had, I think, Jefferson Aeroplane played, and Ike and Tina Turner, I think, also played, and a few other people. And again, I don't want to go into the whole thing because it does show, but basically it gets, sort of more and more unruly as it goes on, and there's some really interesting footage of them sort of trying to calm the crowd down, looking really jittery with some beer swigging, kind of leather jacketed hard nuts hanging on stage.
I just remember the Hells Angels looking quite angry, and Jagger going, "Cool it, man! Cool it, cats!"
And all that sort of stuff. I mean, I think the lead singer from Jefferson Aeroplane was knocked out by one of them earlier in the day as well.
What?
But anyway, it said, it's really interesting. If you don't know the story of Altamont, it is worth watching. And just kind of to get towards the end of the list, we haven't even touched on your top three. Which do you want to list off for us?
Just in reverse order. I'll do it as quick as I can.
We can add a little section in. I think we can go a few minutes over. It's fine. But what's your number three?
Okay, number three is Searching for Sugar Man,
which is 2012.
A very interesting story about South African.
He's American, lived in Detroit.
Yes,
Sixto Rodriguez,
and but a South African journalist, record store owner, gets very intrigued in what happened to this singer, because back in 1970-ish he was one of the 3 or 4 most popular recording artists.
His album was basically the sound of the apartheid movement.
It was a bit confusing because he was called Rodriguez, so the Sugar Man related to one of the songs, I think.
Yep.
And he only did 2 albums, and then he disappeared, and there were all sorts of rumours about him committing suicide, and nobody, because obviously South Africa at that point were very
it was a combination of them being cut off, and also the majority of his records were bootlegged, so there was no there was no way of tracing back. Plus, he was also signed on a record label that became defunct, if memory serves. So there was basically, it was very, very hard to trace him.
Yeah, he did nothing in America, apparently. Sold sort of very few. And so this journalist character goes looking for him, and if you haven't seen it, go and look at
that's it. So it's a question of sort of the start. The initial poser is this guy alive, and what is he doing? Where does he live? I will just make a quick note on the album. The first album is an absolute classic. I thought the
music is fab.
I thought the second album was a bit rubbish.
Did you? Okay.
Coming from reality, the second one I didn't care much for, which I think is probably partly wise. The first album was one because he was coming towards. He was doing kind of folk style music towards the end of the folk period, and it was in Detroit as well. She had the rise of Motown at that period. So he did the first album, which was a little late for its time, but at the same time it was such a classic. It is one of those ones that could have been released at any era and would have, or should have been seen as being a classic album. The second one, on the other hand, was pretty bad, and that's probably what led to his decline.
I wouldn't mind listening to the whole albums actually, but I'm sure they're online. So.
I think they're both knocking about, and they can be found. What's your number 2?
Number 2 is School of Rock.
The Jack Black, which Jack is Black piece. It's an interesting choice. It's an interesting choice.
In what way interesting? Why is it interesting?
It's kind of, it's a comedy. It's not too serious. I mean, it is quite funny. I'll say that much. The music's all right, but what makes it number 2? That's
because it's thoroughly enjoyable. I think Jack Black. I think it's Jack Black. It's his energetic best. I like his action,
charisma.
His physical charisma. And he's also an accomplished. I mean, he's in his own band. He's an accomplished sort of player.
Well, Tenacious D, obviously, with their classic track Tribute, amongst others.
And I like the other characters at school. I mean, can I briefly say?
Give us,
so he's a bit of a loser, and his flatmates encourage him to pay some rent. And one of his male flatmate who's a bit of a wet, weak, and his girlfriend is a
Basically, they want him out because he's sleeping on their couch and doesn't have a job, etc., etc.
And then he picks up a call for some work for his flatmate, and as a temp teacher, and he takes it on, and he goes and sits in the class. And there's this funny line where he kind of just wings it, and then he sits in the class, and the first thing he asks is, "Has anybody got any food?" So he gets some food or something, and then he sits back with his feet on the desk, and he says, "Look, kids, I'm hungover. Just have recess. We'll get onto the schooling stuff tomorrow." And that's his attitude until he hears them play music, and he gets all excited because he's into this music, because his band's kicked him out, and he forms a band, and I really like the music and the characters.
Strong characters. Okay, shall we? I mean, we don't really need to explain this too much because there is one. For people who've been following this, one very obvious omission in the list so far. I think the one that anyone who cares anything about films that involve bands or music will. I mean, you're pretty hard pressed to find anyone that wouldn't label this as their number 1 film. To be honest. So do you want to just name it, Toby? 1984.
What's the official title?
It's that one there.
This is Spinal Tap.
This is not just Spinal Tap.
Yes.
This is Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
Which I mean, we're running out of time.
It's a seminal corker.
I mean, you don't. Yeah. I mean, we can sit here for the next hour just kind of relaying quotations and scenes. But I mean, it's basically one of those films where basically every single scene is a classic. And almost pretty much every single line spoken in that film is a classic. It is
Big bottom. I met her on Monday, my lucky Monday, etc.
Miniature Stonehenges, dwarves, sound checks, amps that go to 11, guitars had never been played.
Yeah, don't point it.
Piano piece called "Lick My Love." I mean, there's just so many brilliant scenes. Going down corridors forever before you can find a stage.
And that actually happened.
Yeah,
the band Saxon. Because one of the researchers of the film followed the band Saxon around, and that's what they were getting
lost around the tunnels. Okay, and also actually just to link in, we'll just make a quick note to 2008's Anvil, the story of Anvil, which has often been labelled as the real life Spinal Tap. Would you agree with that statement? Just before we finish,
I would. On a smaller scale, it's got the bit of a battle between the two of the members in the band, the one who's overly enthusiastic and slightly childlike because they've been in this world of rock forever, so they're sort of out of reality, and then this other more serious and uptight character that comes through. So it's not quite the same as Spinal Tap, but it has that.
Is it sufficiently
battle.
Funny, or is it more sad, or is it a bit of both, or is it kind of humour through desperation?
I think it's just a level on. It's neither sad nor
it's a level.
Right. Neither sad nor.
Well, on that very placid note,
we're gonna.
I'll have one question for you before we go. It's not a trivia question, but you sent me a piece that you and Bias had put together the other week. Regarding Spinal Tap and Star Wars.
Right, one of our many attempts.
Would you like us to play out on said recording?
If you think it's good enough, Stu, then you play away.
Okay, right. We're going to stop the recording and then maybe discuss the nature of how we're going to add on the bit at the end. And if we do, should we say it's almost like early Mighty Boosh is probably the best way. The early radio series of Mighty Boosh of Julian Barrett talking to Noel Fielding, which essentially sounded like a general just discussion, recorded and edited down. But yeah, maybe we'll play out on that then. And until then, we will see you next week.
Cheerio and good night. Right, okay, right, now, Darth, right? Darth, yeah.
What?
What are you talking about?
Well,
what are you talking about with this old, you're my father thing, right?
Well,
I don't get it. I don't get it, you know. Like,
well,
were you married to my mother or what?
Well, married is a very formal term.
Yeah.
I would say she was more of an acquaintance.
Yeah. Right. Okay. That's awfully brief, isn't it? That's awfully.
If I'm
brief.
honest, I don't.
What?
Really remember her name or her face.
No, right. Get your lightsaber out, mate. Because
I've got it. I've got my lightsaber goes up to 11.
No. That's it goes to 11. Right.
Mine does. It's gone up to. It's up to 11 right now.
Mine goes to 11, right?
Yeah.
And then it goes to 12. So you better watch it.
That's not allowed.
Oh,
I don't.
really?
That's cheating. I don't know. I think.
Well,
11's the highest you can go. Is 10. Most lightsabers go up to 10, and then. But my lightsaber goes up to 11.
Right. Well, that's
just when you need a little extra push to.
Yeah.
To beat the other Jedi, you go up all the way up to
all the
way up to 11.
Ben Kenobi, yeah.
Who's that?
You took 11 to Ben Kenobi, did you?
Oh, I did a bit. Yeah, I did a bit with 11 on him.
Yeah. Well,
you know, I blasted him with 11.
Yeah. Well, I didn't like that. So
I had him at 11 for 11s. You see.
Right. So now we're gonna have a fight now.
We have a lightsaber fight.
Yeah, we're going to have a fight
that's
now,
what you do, isn't it?
Yeah, because I didn't like the way you treated my mum.
I should warn you, I am grade 11 in lightsaber.
Alright, it's very impressive, but I'm 11. I'm 11 plus.
Well, I am quite asthmatic.
Yeah.
So I might need to take some breathers during this period.
Well, I'm not going to give you any. What do you call it? I'm not going to give you any. I'm not going to give you any leeway on that.
Yeah.
Because that's your own fault. Because you shouldn't smoke so much. That's up to you.
Yeah.
You shouldn't smoke. You shouldn't smoke cigars and stuff.
It was a bit of a shock, was it? You finding out I was your father?
Yeah.
You weren't expecting that one, were you? Really, you weren't expecting that one.
No,
were you?
I wasn't. And I actually chucked myself off a spaceship. So that's how strong it was, and my mum didn't tell me, and I almost died.
Really?
But you didn't care, did you, Dad?
Well, this lightsaber goes up to 11.
No, right, yeah, sorry. We're going to have a lightsaber fight now. So you can talk who you like, Dad, but we're going to have a lightsaber fight now. Alright?
Well, I've this lightsaber, I call it the big woman.
Yeah, I don't care what you call it, mate. It's blue. It's very. But I've got a lightsaber, and we've both got lightsabers, and then
it's very nice.
We're just going to basically fight out. Yeah,
buxom lightsaber. You know, it's got quite a lot of.
Yeah, don't refer to my mum.
It's quite
like
a sexy lightsaber.
No, don't refer to my mum like that.
The handle's got a lot of sort of leather tassels on it and stuff. You know.
No, don't, or I'll get really cross, right? And I'll chop your head off with my lightsaber. Alright.
Well, that's not a very nice thing to do to your father, is it?
Well,
all I did was try and take over the galaxy and abandon you as an infant.
Yeah, well, I've just got cross about that.
It's a bit bitter.
Okay, alright. But, right, let's go for it then.
Yeah?
Yeah.
you.